Sneezy this week. I'm looking forward to this. Thanks, guys.
What are we on? Week 6. It's week 6, isn't it? Week 6. Good. I've only got 2 dwarfs left. Otherwise, I was running out of one. I was going to have to make one up. So, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. We are 6 weeks into this series, and Sneezy today. And so we've been looking at all the traits of the different dwarfs and seeing how they relate to us. And so Sneezy's today. And so, who hates that thing when you need to sneeze and yet you can't sneeze? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It was really tickly, and you're even getting the. I do the whole look at the light thing. You go, and your body's going, nah, I'm just winding you up. And I like to do this thing when Steph's about to sneeze. When she gets the old, I say, excuse you, or pardon you, and it interrupts her rhythm, and then she gets really annoyed because she then can't sneeze, apparently. If you've never done it, men, do it. It's great. You'll be rewarded with a smack in the face. But who's a loud sneezer? Come on, hands up. Who's a loud sneezer? Really loud sneezer. Who's one of them quiet sneezers where it's all internal? You know, the introvert sneezer, where it's like a... and you do it. I don't even know what that is. It's not even a sneeze. The idea of a sneeze is to remove things from your body. I'm definitely more of a loud sneezer. And where you inward sneezers, I don't get you. It's not a proper sneeze. If you're going to do something, do it properly. That's my motto. And so I actually really like to do an even louder sneeze than is appropriate. Is anyone on the same with me? I do this thing, and I love it, and my mother-in-law who lives with us hates it, I'm sure. I do like, has anyone heard the Goofy sneeze? When Goofy sneezes, he gets like really loud and high-pitched. And so I try and do my best impression every time I sneeze when I'm in my house. Not out in public, that'd be stupid. But every time I'm in my house, I try and do the Goofy sneeze, and it's as loud as possible. And the reason being is because I'm actually a naturally loud sneezer. And so, like, if you are a loud sneezer, it's probably because you've got overdeveloped diaphragm muscles or something, and so it wants to force it out of you. My wife will tell you, when I'm poorly and I'm sick, I'm like, it's like the end of the world noise coming out of me. It's like, oh, because of my muscles are just like generating so much force. But some of you are more delicate and gentle and say, it's very sticky, you know. And so I think you loud sneezers, it's because your body is strong in that department, and so it's forcing stuff out of your body hard. And if you're like me, your wife doesn't like you sneezing loud, and she's like, can't you do it quiet? Can't you do it internally like one of them weird people? What did you say? It hurts. It hurts. If you're not one of these people, you don't understand our pain. But it hurts. If you do it internally, the pain of all the muscles and in the face, it hurts. And so you choose, I don't want to hurt. And so I sneeze out, nice and loud, for everyone to share. Sharing is caring. Where some of you others go in with it. And the problem is with me, I'm a loud sneezer, but the bigger problem is I'm like sensitive to everything. Everything makes me want to sneeze. And so, and I mean everything. Like any strong mint, anyone like me? A strong mint will make you have a tree ball mint. It'll make me sneeze. If the sun comes out from behind a cloud, it makes me sneeze. I'm very photosensitive. Some of you don't believe this is a real thing. It is a real thing for people who suffer with it. The sun comes out and makes you sneeze. See, ladies, no, it's not. That's not true. It is true. I'm telling you. It's true. Air fresheners, perfumes, these silly things that plug in the wall, plug in stuff. I go near one of them, I get an instant headache and want to sneeze immediately. I'm so sensitive. I know I'm a sensitive guy. In not many areas, but in this one, I am incredibly sensitive to anything like that, and it makes me sneeze, and so I sneeze often and loud. But why do we sneeze? Why do we sneeze? There's lots of mechanisms of why we go into this physiologically, but in some regards, in many regards, it's because we're actually intolerant to something. Our body, in a way, doesn't want to tolerate something that's getting into our noses or into our breathing systems. And there's other reasons why we do this as well. But it's part of the body saying, I don't want to tolerate that thing in my surrounding. I want to get it out. And so that's why you inward sneezers. You're doing yourself a disservice because you're not getting anything out. Whereas loud sneezers, we're doing it properly, the way it's written in Scripture. It's not. I'm joking. But your body's intolerant to something, and it's saying, your body's saying, get it far away from me. I don't want it near me. Get it away from me. And so it's about sort of intolerance. And when I think about that word, me, like I said, I'm very sensitive. I used to have my daughter has it as well, but has tummy pain from a very young age. Like every night, complaining. That's how we found out she was diabetic, because we went to the doctor so often about her tummy pain that they discovered it by accident somehow. But I've always had tummy pain from a very young age. From like the age I could talk, I'd tell my mum I'd have a tummy pain. And so I used to get pain terribly with particular foods, but certain foods I knew would trigger it, like sweet corn or any beans or pulses or anything like that. And in the past, I had scans, all sorts of... I went for years to the NHS, back and forward, trying to do stuff, all different blood tests, all that sort of stuff. You know, a camera, you know what I'm saying? Can't recommend it enough. It's a lovely day out. I'd done 5 stars on TripAdvisor. No, it was a nice day out. Highly recommend it. But I had all these things, and they were just like, we don't really know what's going on, just put up with it. But I also had one of them intolerance tests. Has anyone had these? You send off your blood, and they tell you what you're intolerant to, what your body doesn't like to be in contact with. And they test like 600 foods and non-foods. And I thought, I'll do this, and I might get some results back, because I had some friends who'd done it, and they'd had like 2 or 3 things come back, and they cut it out of their diet, and it made all their symptoms go away. And I was like, I like the idea of that. So I sent off for this test, thinking, oh, maybe there's a couple of things I can cut out. No, out of the 600 or so things they tested, 60 came back on this list. 60 things came back to me that said, you're probably a little bit intolerant to this. And the big one that I knew that was a thing anyway was sweet corn. I knew my body didn't like that. But then, and I love sweet corn. My mum used to grow sweet corn on her allotment, and it's like, I can't eat this. I understood that early. But then, our second veg of choice in our house, was broccoli. Probably the same in many of yours. Broccoli's like the mainstay veg for most of... And it's like, oh, your body doesn't particularly like broccoli. I knew my dad had problems with some veggies as well. And then, I was so disappointed because the meat that came up was my favourite meat, lamb. Oh, I love lambs. Lamb. I said to Skylar the other day about lambs, and we were talking about lambs in a field, and she went, delicious. It's like, that's my girl. I love you. And then another one that came up that I was intolerant to was maple syrup, and I thought, I'm not bothered about that, because it's like honey, a bit more delicious, but it's like 6 times the price. I'll just eat honey, so that one was fine with me. But then, some of you know me well, tea. Tea was one of my things. I'm like, I drink 4 million cups of tea a day. It's probably why my body's going, I'm not happy with this. But tea was, I was like, it's fine, don't worry. I'll just drink coffee. Next one down on the list, coffee. I was like, come on. It's not fair. And then I found out as well, I was basically intolerant to the proteins that are in milk as well. I'm like, I had that in the coffee and the tea. I love milk, love cereal. And then I was like, well, I've hardly got anything left. The only other things left I like are really hot food. And then chili peppers was on there as well. And now when I think about all these things I've eaten in the past, I'm like, yeah, that adds up now. Anytime I have chili, and I love it. I used to eat it where I couldn't feel the heat in my mouth. I got so used to it, and yet my tummy's going, it's just not very happy about this. But I couldn't feel it. I had no pain receptors in my mouth. And then I found other things like rapeseed oil, or rapeseed and rapeseed oil, which to you, maybe I don't think you use this term in the States, but it's basically all the oils in all the foods that are in all the foods in the UK. Because it's the cheapest thing, it's everything's fried in it. And I knew from a young age, from driving past fields of this, I'd get an immediate headache as well. Some of you might be the same. And so I had intolerance to this as well. And it's like, yeah, that's fair enough. And then the kicker that came was then wheat. Wheat, and I'm like, that's like the mainstay in all our foods, all our natural carbs, and I understand now. Whenever I eat wheat, I do not feel good. And then I had a couple of weird ones, which you think wouldn't impact you, but do. You know, Steph always tells you about my pillows that I take on holiday. The reason they're so special is because they're made with feathers, and particularly duck feathers. And so duck feathers is one of my things that I'm intolerant to. Who'd known I've had my head on it for 40 years, and yet it was, and then this one came up, and I was like, oh, maybe it's all the things I'm in contact with a lot. Maybe these are coming back on the test. But then this one came back. I was like, this is going to make us like ferret skin. Ferret, not even ferret fur, ferret skin. That's like a bald ferret. I don't rub bald ferrets on me. And if you do that, that's your choice. But honestly, it's just item after item after item. I was just like, this is crazy. Like all different tree pollens. And I was just like, oh, come on, badgers. No, it wasn't on there. The French. No, they weren't on there. I love the French. But it seems as though, at least from the outside that I'm a highly intolerant guy. And so when you add that with intolerable, I've got the full set. I'm both intolerant and intolerable. And so it seems from the outset that I am an intolerant guy in many regards. But these are all physical things that my body or your body would be intolerant to. But today I want to talk about really is intolerance to people. I want to talk about how we can be intolerant to people. And this is a very nuanced and difficult subject to navigate. But how we can be intolerant to people. And what do I mean? You know, we can be intolerant to all different types of people. Some of you are so intolerant to, like, stupid people. Like, they're the number one on your list. You can't help but sneeze in their face. Every time they're around you, you get a reaction. You come up in hives. You just like, Urgh! Maybe the grumpy dwarf comes out, but a reaction happens. You're intolerant to them. It could be loud people. It could be loud people. It could be rude people. See, some of you Americans in here, you think you're very polite, but compared to the British, they think you're rude. They say what they mean. How rude. For some people, it's people in authority. For others, it's anyone who challenges them in any regard. You have an intolerance to them and you can't have it around you and you've got to get it away from you. We can be intolerant to people's choices, the things that they do, their behaviors or their views, or even their generic worldview, or even their view on God. We can be intolerant to all of these things, and the list is endless. And I'll be honest with you, I love, like, political debate. I do. I really like political debate. I love it on our podcast that we're talking about. Some of the sort of first principles of what we believe in as a society, about how the country should be run. I love all that sort of debate and talking around topics. I do. I love different ideas. I love switching my position on ideas mid-conversation when I'm talking with people, because I love the debate of talking around ideas. And yet, I only like it when it's in good faith. When there's in good faith discussions where people come with different views and they're actually trying to understand the other person's point of view. That's when I like it. That's when I think it's beautiful. That's when I think people move toward truth. And I love that even in the political realm. And yet it's so, especially nowadays, it's so very rare, isn't it? That you can get two people with, let's just talk about politics, from two different political parties talking on a stage or having a conversation or a podcast or something. And very rarely is it in good faith, thinking, I want to understand your position. And I want to walk alongside you and let's see if we can compromise and agree on something. It's so rare to see that, even in conversation, let alone in action or policy. But there's usually an absolute intolerance for the other person. It's like they're bad or evil or so wrong that you can't be around them. And even talking about their point infuriates you. And because of the views they hold, they're often, and you watch it on political, even people who are on the same side in a political party running for office or something in the States or running for a particular seat, they'll start bad-mouthing each other on stage to make it's like it's like the winger in a football having a go at the goalkeeper. You're rubbish! It's like we're on the same team. We're trying to do the same thing, achieve the same goal. And yet so often when we see people talking to each other who hold different views or different perspectives, what happens is people attack the other person and not their ideas. That's what's happened in our culture now, isn't it? Especially on social media. They don't attack, you could say something, post a view, and they'll attack you as an individual, not your actual idea or the thing that you're stating. It's like, you're bad, don't worry about the concept you're talking about, we'll just shelve that for a minute. You're evil because of all these things. Never mind that, because then I don't have to argue my point. I can just point at you and say you're horrible. I can be intolerant to you and move you off. I can push you away. I can sneeze in your face so I don't have to deal with you. And it's so common. But why is it so common? I think it's common, and this is a weird phrase again, it's because there's a sneezy, intolerant dwarf in all of us. I think in some regards there's this intolerant dwarf who doesn't like people of different opinions or just, people who just wind you up. We've got that in us, that dwarf who just wants to sneeze it out and be like, get away from me, I don't want to deal with you. So what does God think about how we deal with the people we find hard to tolerate? Because you've got a list. You might not have written it down. Some of you probably have. Your hit list. But what does God think about how we should deal with people that we find hard to tolerate, or the actions that they do. In Colossians 3:13-15, it says this, and we hate this. Make allowance for each other's faults. And it's always what we consider their fault. That's why we find it intolerable, because it's what we consider they're at fault. If we were at fault, we'd have to do some changing. But it's the people who we think are at fault. Make allowances for each other's faults. What's that saying? Is be tolerant of each other to some regard. And it says this, and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, check it, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. And let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. Can I tell you, it's a really good job that other people tolerated me, like in early church life. But even in my workplaces, even in my family, even my friendship groups, even today in my friendship group, I'm glad that people tolerate me. Because if not, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in church if people early on wouldn't have tolerated me or frankly found my actions intolerable. And so maybe I'm framing it in this way, that maybe I should give that person who I just don't like very much more time and patience. Maybe that's what you're thinking I'm talking about. It's like, just people who do your head in a bit, I need to be a bit more grace-filled. And I'm not actually talking about that, even though I think it's included. What I'm talking about is, but when you think their actions are completely wrong. Not just someone who you don't get along with, who's just a different cup of tea to you, a different personality type. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who you actually think, you are so wrong, you can't be more wrong. What do we do with them people? Do we make allowance for their faults and forgive them if they offend us, when their actions offend us, when their worldview offends us, which is really weird if you think about it? So I want to ask you a question. Can you tolerate someone whose actions you find intolerable? Can you tolerate someone whose actions you find intolerable? And for some of you, it might be obviously no, because otherwise that question doesn't make any sense. You can't tolerate something that you find intolerable. That's an oxymoron as a statement. But for now, what I want to do is separate the person and their actions. I want to separate the person and their views and float the idea of tolerating someone, but finding their actions completely intolerable. I'm talking about tolerating somebody as an individual, even though you find their actions completely intolerable. When you look at John 4:6-19, when you see how Jesus met this woman at the well, and it says Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired, as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. See, Steph said a few weeks ago, do it tired. Jesus is even doing it tired. He was knackered. He sat down by the well like, oh, flipping out, these disciples are doing my head in. He sent them off to McDonald's in the town. Go and buy some food, he said. It was about noon when a Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, I love this, will you give me a drink? It says his disciples had gone into town to buy food. And it says the Samaritan woman said to him, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? She's saying we shouldn't even be talking here. One, I'm the wrong gender. We don't do this. Two, we're completely different people groups. This social interaction shouldn't be happening. For Jews did not associate with Samaritans. But check it out. His opening line to this woman was, can you give me a drink? Can you, you've got a bucket, I ain't got one. Can you give me some water? I need some water. Can you help me? His opening line wasn't, if you know the story, you, young lady, are a sinner. He didn't say that. It was, can you help me? Even though Jesus said, I'm better than you in every way possibly measurable, can you help me? And he, without a rope and a bucket, allowed a woman of a culturally different planet whose lifestyle he didn't agree with. And he made that really apparent later. He didn't agree with her lifestyle. He found her actions intolerable. But he said, can you help me? Think about that for a minute. How he was saying, you're in a position of power now. I need your help. He lowered himself. He humbled himself. Can you help me? Can you get me water, this vital thing that we need, especially in this culture? We just turn a tap on and take it for granted. But Jesus was knackered and thirsty, and he was saying to someone who in every measurable way was above in society. And he said, can you help me? I'm in need. He didn't point out her intolerable behavior. And Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who is asked you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Verse 11 says, sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did all his sons and livestock? And Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, pointing to the well. Everyone who drinks this natural water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And the woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. And he told her, go. And I love this. So he's now in relationship with her. Very shallow perhaps, but he's offering her something. He's asked something of her and now he's offering something back. And he says, go, call your husband and come back. Jesus knew. And she said, I have no husband, she replied. And Jesus said to her, you're right. And she's probably thinking, I know I'm right. He said, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you've said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see you are a prophet. Imagine if, like, Jesus could have said exactly the same things, but the other way around. Imagine he opened up with his view of her behavior. Like Jesus saying, the way you've lived your life, I don't think is good for you. And find it intolerable. You shouldn't be living like this. It's not good. And yet he didn't open up with that. He didn't go, oi, woman! Although Jesus used to call women, he just, oi, imagine doing that today in a shop. Oi, woman! You get a slap. Oi, woman, you've had 5 husbands and you're not married to the fella you're sleeping with at the minute. Imagine the dialogue. Like that would have been shut. That would be the shortest conversation in history. She would have hit him with the bucket probably and left. But no, he pointed out the thing that he found intolerable. But after he built a bridge, and with no condemnation either, but from a position of love. And we go to John 4:28 to 30. It says this, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way toward him. Can we jump down to verse 39, please? And it says this, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of this woman's testimony. Imagine that. Loads of people got saved and followed Jesus because of the way Jesus interacted with this woman initially. And they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days, and because of his words, many more became believers. And it wasn't that Jesus wasn't, or was tolerant even of her sin. It's not that Jesus was like, that thing in you, it doesn't matter. I'm not bothered about it. But, check it, he was more interested in her than he was about her sin. He was more interested in her as a person than he was interested in her intolerable behavior. He tolerated her even though he didn't tolerate her actions. And when you look at this compared to how the Pharisees, like the religious leaders of the time, and some of you might think of very super spiritual Christian people in your world might do the same thing. When we look at John 8, 3 to 18, I'm going to read from the NLT version, please, and it's from verse 3. And Jesus was doing some teaching as usual, and it says this, as he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. So like even no matter what position you hold with morals, nearly everyone on the planet thinks that's not a good thing. Like near 99% of people would be like, that's not a good thing. No matter what you think about, no matter what your worldview is, it's like this behavior isn't tolerated in most societies. It's like it's not a good thing. And it says this, they put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. And it says the law of Moses, which they were living under at the time, says to stone her. Throw stones at her until she dies. And they asked Jesus, what do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could just use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, But let the one who's never sinned throw the first stone. I love that. He's so smart. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest. I love that. The one who's done the most wrong in their life decided, I better leave because I've done a lot of stuff. Until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Love that. Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said this, neither do I. Check that. Didn't even one of them condemn you? Jesus said, even though your behavior is intolerable, I do not condemn you. But he then says, but go away and sin no more. You see, he was like, I love you. I give you complete grace. I don't condemn you, but your behavior is intolerable. I tolerate you, but your behaviors are intolerable. And he goes out of the gate with love and forgiveness, but doesn't just stop there. He goes on to say, your behavior is not good. Go away and sin no more. Don't do that thing that you were doing. You know, in this powerful example, Jesus shows how he tolerated the woman. He tolerated the woman in order to address the intolerable actions. I want you to think about that with our interactions with people in our life that we find completely intolerable. And Jesus' model for us, it looks like, is that we should tolerate them to maybe build relationship further enough that we can then maybe address their intolerable actions. Maybe that's our role, maybe it's not. But our first course of action, not like the Pharisees, not like perhaps many Christians in our culture, is just to point and point out intolerable behavior and basically sneeze on people. And just so, I find this intolerable, so I've got to tell you I find it intolerable. In fact, I can't even be near you. Maybe you don't sneeze on them. You do what I do with smelly candles and things. You just remove yourself from it instead. And so we remove ourselves as a Christian from the world, and we try and, everything that's intolerable to us, we move and move further back and back into the walls of the church until we've got this pure little box of how many people? One, Jesus. Everyone else has got to leave. It's a purity spiral that goes all the way down to Jesus, just like the Pharisees all leaving one at a time. That would be us. Because, can I tell you, you're intolerable in many regards. If you don't believe me, ask your spouse. The Pharisees, although they were really concentrating on trying to trap Jesus, they highlight sort of their heart, really, by the reaction to the woman's intolerable behavior. They were like, Joel, ready? Achoo! Told me I couldn't do that on stage. I said I'd do it and I'd point at him. That's what they were like. Their reaction to her adultery was just like sneezing in her face for everyone, nice and loud as well, for everyone to see in front of a crowd. They were like me doing a goofy sneeze in my house. Everyone, I'm sneezing! That's what they were doing. They were intolerant to that, and they had to let everyone know, especially the woman. But it was their reaction was based on their intolerance. Just like when I flare up when I eat something that my body doesn't like to tolerate. The reaction is based on my intolerance to that thing. And the same with the Pharisees. Their reaction was based on their intolerance to that action. I want you to think about that. Their reaction was based on their intolerance to her behavior. Their reaction was not based on the love and concern for that woman. They were more worried about their itchy noses and how it impacted them than they were worried about how many people they'd sneeze on, the devastation it would cause. Can you bring yourself to see the person through their intolerable actions? To see the person behind their mistakes, to see the person behind their choices, behind even their awful views. And I had a really deep conversation years and years ago with some really good friends, in fact. And we got into the subject of racism. And they grew up in an area that racism was rife and it was horrible and witnessed some horrible things. And this friend of mine said, I couldn't ever be around anyone who said or done anything that was mildly racist at all. I can't have it. And I shocked them. And I went, I can. And they were just then like, I was like, oh no, I'm now in the crossfire. I'm now in the, now you could see the face change. And I was like, hold on, wait, let me explain. I was like, I can do that. But for a purpose. Not because I enjoy it. Not because I'm like, yeah, it's not because I want to influence that behavior. I want to be able to challenge someone. I've been around a lot of people with a lot of horrible views. And sometimes I make the decision, I'm going to tolerate some of that to build relationship to the point like Jesus to then say, and that thing you think or you do, I challenge that in you because I love you and I think that's moronic or stupid or wrong. But when you do that out of the gate, there's just never any change. You can't influence or impact anyone, be it from a spiritual thing or a natural thing, anything in between. I remember saying I would do that and purposely do that to try and influence someone for the better, to actually move them toward truth. And obviously it'd be my version of truth, but I would be willing to tolerate that for the sake of loving somebody who maybe seems slightly unlovable. So my question is, can you love someone whose actions you find intolerable? Can you love someone? That's different than just tolerating them and shutting your mouth. Can you love someone whose actions you find intolerable? Because I'm really glad that our Father in heaven saw past my mistakes through my failings, my weaknesses, my awful views that have maybe hopefully changed and moved towards truth over time. But I'm grateful that he saw me through all of that mess and tolerated me even though he might have disagreed with loads of my actions. And 2 Timothy 2:24-25 says this: a servant of the Lord, if you're going to follow Jesus, must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone. Oh, that's such a high bar. Be able to teach and be, patient with difficult people. Patient with difficult people, just personality issues who are just difficult, but maybe some really horrible, wrong things that you find completely intolerable, that you find difficult, that gets up your nose and makes you want to sneeze. Check it, verse 25. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Whether that be spiritual truths about God or just other truths that God has led us down to understand are good and wholesome. But gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Check it. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts and they will learn the truth. I love that. That we can take it on the chin, that we would tolerate the intolerable, that would be around the thing that gets up our nose so that we can move someone toward truth. Be intolerant with a person, not tolerant with their actions or their views. And this, within the context of Timothy, is talking about dealing with intolerable behaviours within Christians as well. Because we often hold people who don't follow Christ to a standard that they've never signed up to. And that's weird how you can get really angry and intolerant about the world's views or behaviours. But it says a servant of the Lord should be doing these things. And yet we hold the world to a higher standard than we even meet individually ourselves. So let's go. I've got a few minutes. Let's go a little bit deeper. Should we tolerate intolerance? Now this, you could spend months just thinking about this at night. The complex web we weave with these questions. And you've probably heard of the paradox of tolerance. It's quite a famous paradox. But in short, it states that the only thing we should be intolerant of is intolerance. And it's really complicated. You can think about that for a long, long time. You could drown in that. But otherwise, if we tolerate intolerance, we end up being completely intolerable to everything and everything falls apart. But perhaps you've been a bit like me in the past, where you're very tolerant of people, very tolerant of all different people groups, belief systems, ways of acting, but will not tolerate people that are not tolerant. You might be tolerant of all different types, but if they show some form of intolerance towards someone else, that's the thing that you cannot tolerate. it becomes complicated very quickly. You're happy to write them off. And perhaps when you analyse it, perhaps their view or their behaviour or their intolerance towards that should indeed actually not be tolerated. Just like Jesus. There were some things he's like really clear cut, that should not be tolerated ever. And they're completely wrong. But can you bring yourself to tolerate them, but not their view? Be tolerant even though they're intolerant. Being tolerant of the intolerant. Oh, how many times can I say that? What I'm getting at is, can you choose in which way you will display your disagreement? Because some of you are great, you're intolerant to some things and you've got to work on that. But for me, it was an intolerance to intolerance. That was where I had that's where it got right up my nose. And I remember, I've told this story before, years ago, a lady came into Food Bank when we were at the Charles Burrell Centre trying to bring some food in to donate. And she said these words, as long as some of it goes towards our kind. And in me, and I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what kind she was talking about. I could, be really graceful and assume she meant humankind, but she didn't. She meant some other metric of measure of what kind. I don't know if she meant from England. I didn't know if she meant race. I didn't know if she meant religion. I didn't know what it was, but I was just like, and I got hot. I did. I get hot really quickly, but like when someone irritates me, it's weird. It's like I've jumped into a sauna. I go, but I composed myself. And I said to her, well, we'll help anyone in need. We'll help absolutely anyone, no matter what they look like or what they're from. I think I listed a few other things just to encapsulate whatever she meant. And I said, and if you're okay with that, then we'll take your donation. Thank you very much. And I smiled, and I'd done it with respect, and I was being really clear. I'm not tolerating your view, but I will tolerate you because you're giving us food. But I honestly was responding in love, in a challenging way that maybe made her think, but maybe built a bridge that they'd have more interactions in the future, in the hope to maybe shift her view, hopefully, even slightly toward the one of valuing everyone who's in need. And who knows, maybe I didn't, but I know that I didn't let the sneezy dwarf in me control my reaction, that I was in control of my reaction. Because I've done that too, where I haven't controlled that reaction. And I've told this story as well as I finish. Back in 2012 at a Tesco collection for Food Bank in Brandon, 2012, and a guy brought a tin of something and said to me, this is obviously a few years before this other story, he said to me, but this, I don't want it going to any foreigners. And I hadn't quite learnt the response and the control of walking in the Holy Spirit at that point, because I'd never heard that said to me, and maybe that had prepared me to respond in a different way to somebody else, but I would just got angry, and like I am a sarcastic person, but the sarcasm came out of me so strong, it was like the Hulk on steroids with sarcasm, but I was also clearly physiologically angry. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, that's fine, right? And I'll get this one, and I got a pen out. I was like, no foreigners on this one, no foreigners on that one. And I was getting angry and getting closer to him because it honestly enraged me. It was really bad. And he was not a big bloke, and he was getting a little bit, and then he ended up taking out £20 out of his pocket and put it in the money tin we were collecting as well. Buy some more as well, mate, okay? And he walked off. And it seemed like a good tactic to me. But my uncontrolled response shut down dialogue. It did. It shut down any dialogue, any influence. All he was scared of me. A big, angry, at the time, 19-stone rugby player. I probably had a black eye from playing the week before. Getting angry at him about something he said, because he probably thought I was on his side. He probably thought, yeah, most people agree with this view. And I was just like, nah. And I was so in his face about it, but I just... My uncontrolled response shut down any dialogue. And his view, I'm sure, didn't change. And what probably happened, I can never know, but what probably happened is his view was just cemented and just pushed down a layer that won't come out again for anyone else to challenge. The sneezy dwarf took control. That intolerable behaviour that got up my nose made me react and sneeze like Goofy in his face. And what I did was burn a bridge instead of build a wall. Sorry, yeah. I burnt a bridge, and I built a wall. I burnt the bridge that could have happened just like the other lady, building a bridge for the future, and I built a wall up because of the way of my intolerance for intolerance displayed itself. And my sneezy dwarf was in control. And am I saying this is for every situation, for every person at every time? I'm not. But what I'm getting at is that we want to endeavour to see the person behind their view, behind their sin, behind their attitude, their mistake, their political opinion, their intolerable behaviour. And bottom line is ask ourselves, can we love a person enough to tolerate the intolerable? Because perhaps there is a sneezy dwarf living inside all of us that wants to react to people, but perhaps instead of sneezing over people and repelling them, we should prescribe the sneezy dwarf in us some Puritan and perhaps blow his nose from time to time. And I'm telling you, you'll still be intolerant to the things you're intolerant to. They'll still wind you up, they'll still get up your nose, but the reaction to them is controlled. We need to be led by the Holy Spirit from situation to situation and know when to be bold and to not tolerate and draw a sign and flip the tables, but also when to be gentle and overlook a comment or insult or mistake, to build a bridge and not a wall, because nobody wants to be sneezed on. I've never known anyone be sneezed on and go, thanks, mate. No one wants to be sneezed on. So let's not let the sneezy dwarf reign. Let's not sneeze over people like Goofy. And you might argue, like at the beginning, like Angie said, but Phil, I'm a loud sneezer. If I hold it in, it hurts. Yeah. When you find something intolerable and you want to say something, it hurts for you to hold it in. But Jesus would want us to take it on the chin, just like if you met somebody new, you're out in public, you're eating food with people, you wouldn't just sneeze over the table. Well, hopefully you wouldn't just sneeze over the table. You'd take that pain on the chin, sneeze inwardly, and then go, oh, that was so hard. And the same, I believe, with interactions with people that we find intolerable, who get up our nose. Perhaps sometimes Jesus is calling us to, you know what, you're still intolerable to it, but do you sneeze inward? Sneeze inward and be led outward by the Holy Spirit. Maybe it's better to sneeze inward and it be uncomfortable for you than sneezing over someone else and repelling them for good and not being able to influence or lead them into the kingdom or toward our King Jesus. So, do I need to pass you a tissue? Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for